Kyle Richards and Teddi Mellencamp were enjoying a peaceful, sunny stroll through the quiet neighborhood of Encino, one of those rare Los Angeles afternoons when the breeze felt just right and the worries of the world seemed a little more distant. Side by side, their steps matched in rhythm as they chatted casually, their dogs padding along with them on leashes, tails wagging, completely unaware that the serenity of the moment was about to be shattered by something unpredictable, something that neither of them could have seen coming. For Kyle, walks like this were more than just exercise, they were mini escapes. The sidewalks of Encino, lined with leafy trees and the occasional jogger or dog walker, felt safe. Familiar. It was one of the few places where she could just be, away from cameras, away from press, away from the pressures of public life. For Teddi, it was a break from the whirlwind too, and she was soaking in the calm energy, laughing softly at something Kyle had said when suddenly, their attention was ripped away by a sound that broke through the calm like shattered glass, a woman's raised voice echoing from just up the block. They both stopped mid-step, their heads turning instinctively toward the commotion. A woman, standing a few yards ahead, was behaving erratically, loud, animated, and aggressively tugging at the leashes of two small dogs who looked more confused than anything. Her arms flailed, voice sharp with irritation. It wasn't the usual scolding of a pet owner fed up with stubborn dogs. No, this was something else. There was something unsettling in her tone, a harshness that felt out of place even in a city used to spectacle. And for Kyle, who has always had a soft spot for animals, something about the way this woman was handling her pets struck a nerve. Without missing a beat, Kyle's protective instincts kicked in. She glanced at Teddi as if to say, "Are you seeing this?" And then, without waiting, she took a few steps forward toward the woman. Teddi followed, cautiously, not sure how this was going to unfold. Kyle's voice, calm but firm, carried through the space between them. "Hey, maybe take it easy on the dogs, okay? They look scared." The woman snapped around, her eyes locking on Kyle like a spotlight. There was a beat of silence, just long enough to register the tension thickening in the air. And then, boom. Like a switch flipping, the woman's energy exploded. She yanked off her scarf with theatrical flair, flinging it to the concrete like a gauntlet being thrown down. Her expression twisted from surprise to fury in a flash. Her posture stiffened, and without hesitation, she stormed straight toward Kyle. This wasn't just confrontation. This felt like combat. Everything after that moved both slowly and too fast, like time doing strange things under pressure. Teddi instinctively stepped between them, her arms slightly out, creating a barrier. Her demeanor was shockingly calm, her face steady. She didn't shout. She didn't flinch. She just moved like a shield, placing herself directly between the woman and Kyle. The woman kept coming, her voice rising, her words sharp and accusatory. She was yelling about being judged, about people not minding their business, about how people like you always think they're better. Her eyes were wild, darting between Kyle and Teddi, her body language filled with unpredictability. It was impossible to tell if she was about to swing or simply scream some more, but either way, she was in attack mode. Kyle, seasoned in drama both on and off screen, didn't lose her composure. She did, however, pull out her phone, swiftly, confidently, and began filming. It was a move of self-protection, one born out of years of being in the public eye. If anything happened, if the woman later twisted the story or accused her of something she didn't do, the footage would speak the truth. Her phone became her shield. "Just so we're clear," Kyle said, holding her phone up. "I'm recording you. Back off." But the woman didn't back off. She circled. She moved side to side, trying to get around Teddi. Her eyes stayed locked on Kyle, and her mouth just kept going, each word more venomous than the last. And through it all, Teddi remained like a wall. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't push. She didn't engage. She was just there, still, strong, unmoving. Kyle was the one documenting, Teddi was the one protecting. The moment stretched on. A small group of bystanders gathered at a distance, some curious, some concerned, one or two holding up their own phones, the universal sign of something's going down. A few whispered to each other, wondering who the woman was. Some recognized Kyle. Others didn't. But they all saw the rising storm. Then, like a shift in the wind, a security guard appeared, likely called in from one of the nearby storefronts. He didn't jump into the fray. He didn't grab anyone. He just stood there, observing, his presence alone enough to slightly cool the boiling pot. The woman kept talking. Yelling, really. Her words no longer made much sense. Tangled phrases, misdirected anger, rants that seemed less about dogs or confrontation and more about something deeper, something personal. Rage without a true target. Finally, maybe realizing no one was going to escalate with her, maybe tiring herself out, maybe sensing the collective energy turning cold, she stepped away. Not far. Just enough to retreat a few feet and then collapse onto a low retaining wall near the curb. She sat there, breathing heavily, muttering to herself, still clearly rattled, but quieter now. Her dogs, surprisingly docile despite everything, stood at her feet, as if they too needed a break. Kyle lowered her phone slowly, her fingers still trembling slightly from the adrenaline rush. She exchanged a look with Teddi, gratitude, relief, maybe even disbelief at what had just happened. "Thank you," she whispered. Teddi nodded, her lips pursed, her eyes still on the woman, watching. A few more minutes passed. Crowd began to thin. The security guard lingered, making sure things stayed settled. The woman eventually stood up, scooped up her scarf, dusted it off with unnecessary force, and started crossing the street with her dogs. She didn't look back. But as she reached the far side, another voice rang out, sharp, fierce, female. "Get some help!" shouted one of Kyle's other friends, who had been nearby but not directly involved until now. Her voice cut through the air, one final sting to send the woman on her way. The woman didn't reply. She just kept walking, her dogs trotting silently beside her. And just like that, the chaos dissolved into stillness again. No punches were thrown. No sirens blared. But the emotional imprint of what had happened was heavy. Kyle and Teddi stood still for a while, gathering themselves. Kyle finally turned off the camera on her phone, sliding it back into her purse with a sigh. She brushed her hair away from her face and looked at the sky, maybe just for a moment of grounding. "What even was that?" she said aloud, more to herself than anyone. Teddi finally allowed herself to exhale. "LA," she said simply. "That was LA." And there it was, a surreal, intense, and frankly absurd moment burned into memory. A calm dog walk turned street standoff, an ordinary afternoon morphing into a reminder of how quickly things can spiral in a city where the boundaries between fame, stress, and strangers blur. The dogs, blissfully unaware of the drama that had just unfolded, tugged at their leashes again, eager to keep moving. And so they did. Kyle, Teddi, and their circle of friends resumed their stroll, a little more shaken but a lot more bonded. They shared nervous laughter, rehashing what had just gone down in disbelief. Already, it was turning into a story they'd tell again and again, the day a random woman decided to challenge Kyle Richards in broad daylight over nothing more than a few words of concern. But beyond the surface spectacle, it was something else too. It was a testament to the unpredictability of life in Los Angeles. A place where celebrity meets anonymity on any given street corner. Where a dog walk can suddenly become a defensive maneuver. Where women like Kyle, despite their fame, their influence, their poise, are still vulnerable to being targeted by strangers carrying who knows what pain or anger. Where friends like Teddi don't just pose beside you for paparazzi, they shield you when it counts.